I want to welcome to the program from the great state of South Dakota, I think the pride of Jones County.
There you go.
Right? He's the Republican whip of the United States Senate, John Thune.
Well, it's nice to be on the program.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks, Josh.
It's nice to have you here and in person, no less.
Yeah.
I love
it. In the flesh.
I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on up there.
Yeah, it's a busy time. I tell people we're just trying to keep it on the rails until hopefully we get some reinforcements in November.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, it would be nice. So we can, instead of having to react to the agenda and play a lot of defense, we can start getting on offense.
Yeah, no kidding. But I imagine this time of year, it'd be nice to get back to South Dakota, too. Right?
That's true. Yeah, when summer rolls around South Dakota, that's where you want to be.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, got the walleye biting.
Got the walleye, walleye are biting. Missouri beckons. The Black Hills are full of travelers and lots of activity out there. The Sturgis bike rally gets rolling here pretty fast, and that's always a huge event.
Oh, it's a massive event.
It is. They come from all over.
Do you annually go to that?
I don't annually go.
Because it's got to be tough to get in and out of, right?
Well, it is, and it's a lot of, there aren't that many in-state people. A lot of the locals, they rent their places out, they leave.
Oh, it's sort of a pilgrimage,
and
right?
then they pay, they make bank renting their houses out, and these people come in from all over, but they have a lot of classic rock, 70s and 80s vintage type bands play.
Well, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, and they'll get literally hundreds of thousands of people out there.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, the community, hats off to the community for being able to host that.
Yeah, it is. They do, and huge economic, obviously, impact, not only for the community, but for the state.
So the rest of the state leaves town and scouts out the jackrabbits, tries to figure out how they're going to do this year, huh?
Yeah, well, there's that, and there's the jackrabbits and the coyotes, it's gotten to be, our teams have really come along. We went to Division I here a few years back, and we're what's considered those are two mid-major programs, but have really excelled in a lot of
They
areas.
really have. I mean, they're playing big-time competition now.
We're excited for them, proud of them, and yeah, it's in a small state like South Dakota, especially in the winter months, there's not a lot else to talk about. So we talk about whatever the sports teams are doing, and it becomes a place for people to hang out.
So in terms of your pro sports allegiances, South Dakotans kind of go in a couple of different directions. The vast majority of them I found are Vikings fans.
Right.
Are you a Vikings fan?
Well, and I know you are, Josh.
Yeah, that's why I'm testing the waters here.
I'm an anomaly in Viking country.
Okay.
Since I've been about 6 years old, I've been a Packers fan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I think as I think you probably know, I lost my first election by 524 votes, and I think being an out of the closet Packer fan in Viking country may have cost me my first Senate election, because Viking fans are very intense and serious about it out there.
Let that be a lesson to you, Senator Thune.
That's right. Yeah, I know. I made the mistake once of I couldn't find anything green on St. Patrick's Day, so I threw on a Packer sweatshirt. My kids had got me, and people on the parade route by that time they've imbibed a little bit anyway, but I didn't think I was going to get out of there alive. I mean, people yelling at me. It's like all the Viking fans were going nuts.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a big contingent in South Dakota. Also, like Twins fans, and I mean...
Yeah. A lot of Twins, and western South Dakota, the Missouri River is kind of the dividing line in a lot of ways in South Dakota, but what we call West River, there's more Broncos and Rockies and some of the western stuff, but everything on the east side of the state's pretty much Minnesota.
Well, good thing. It's a good thing.
I know you're happy about that. Yeah.
These are responsible people who have...
And we open, the Vikings and the Packers open September 11th in Minnesota, and I'm hoping to be there.
Yeah, all right, good. Well, let's get down to business, because there's a couple of things in particular that I want to talk to you about, because we've been talking on the show a lot about these two very different areas, but you've had a reputation of not only, in leadership, but also being a pretty serious legislator, in that if you put your name on something, it's not only worth doing, but you're working to try to get it done. You're not one of those guys that just sort of slaps your co-sponsorship or sponsorship on top of legislation and hope you get credit for. You actually have been working for it. And the first one, which I was just enthusiastic to see you sponsor, was the deal as it deals with email and political email being sent. And just by way of background for our audience, there has been a discrepancy between Republicans and Democrats in terms of fundraising and how Google in particular processes mail from campaigns that are Republican versus email that is sent from a Democrat. And there's studies in which that show that Democrat inboxing, they call it, basically that you get the message and it doesn't go to spam, is light years more likely to be delivered than a Republican. And I know this has been a subject of a lot of conversation amongst your colleagues. You're on top of this.
Well, yes, and it is a topic of conversation for obvious reasons. I mean, it's costing Republicans who are running for elective office in this country literally millions, and in some cases tens of millions of dollars. In the 2020 election, North Carolina State University did this study, and they analyzed, and you said Gmail represents about 50% of the email in this country. Then you got Yahoo and Microsoft Outlook and a few others, but that 68% of Republican emails, political emails, fundraising, but other types of political emails, went to spam. 8% of Democrats. I mean, that's a huge delta.
It's impossible to explain, too, right?
They couldn't explain it. I mean, they attempted, but they couldn't. So, we introduced a bill just to say, that the use of the algorithms and the way that they manipulate the content that people see, that you ought to empower the consumer to make that decision. If I want to unsubscribe from something, well, interestingly enough, I mean, even with somebody, if they would, it would go to spam. We had one of our senators who, and she tested this out, sent something or received something, and then it went to spam. She pulled it out of spam, said, "I know I want to get these," and they filtered it out again.
Still went out.
Yeah, still went out. So I think in the end, a lot of this is really these companies are under a lot of criticism in this country for obvious reasons. Part of it is they just aren't transparent.
Right.
They don't show you their work product. They've got these opaque algorithms, and what we're calling for is more transparency, more accountability, and let the consumer make the decision.
Well, what's so frustrating about it is that they're sent oftentimes to what we call house files, right?
Yeah.
So these are people who have willingly contributed to a campaign that they support, and they want to get the information, and they still filter it out. Yeah. I mean, that's a different level. That almost takes sort of sinister intent at some level.
Well, you can't, like I said, when you have a difference of 60 percentage points in the percentage of emails, one party versus the other that are getting spammed instead of inboxed, then something's seriously wrong with your algorithm.
Seriously wrong, yeah.
Right, yeah, and again, absent them coming up with a good explanation for it, we think they need a little help. Yeah. And so we're going to try and see if we can't straighten this out.
Well, and that's the thing. The significance of you putting your name on this is that I'm sure there are people clamoring over at Google to try to provide some solutions. The question is it too little too late? Because, I mean, one of the things that's plagued all of our candidates, and this is a huge contributing factor, is that we have significant chasms between what Democrats are doing online with small dollar and Republicans. Now, part of that is the ecosystem and everything else, but this is a big part of that factor. And honestly, what we're looking at is 3 or 4 to 1 in terms of what could be political spending this November as a result of it.
Absolutely. And the remarkable thing about it really is we had a couple of our folks who in the last election had significant digital success raising money. And when they heard these statistics, they started doing the calculation of how much money they left on the table. And I'm not kidding. I mean, they were guys in the room talking about lawsuits. Yeah. Because it's literally in the millions, and we had a couple of our folks in the tens of millions of dollars.
Wow.
If that proportionality with respect to what was getting filtered and what wasn't actually was the norm during the 2020 election.
So do you think that you're going to get some answers on this now that you've taken the next move, or you think that this is going to require, hopefully, Republican majorities to do something about it legislatively?
Well, we've gotten their attention, let's put it that way. And so they're at least attempting now to reach out. But I do think that if we get the majorities back, we'll be in a much better position, obviously, to legislate on this issue, and if nothing else, to do some fairly straightforward and simple things, which I think most Americans would say, well, that makes sense. If you're using an algorithm to manipulate the content that people are seeing, you ought to notify the consumer about that, and frankly, you ought to give them the option.
Yeah.
If they don't want to get the manipulated content, the algorithmic content, and just get a chronological feed, they ought to have that option. So for us, it's all about empowering the individuals and forcing these companies who operate in the dark in a lot of ways with these opaque algorithms to become more transparent and more accountable.
Well, God bless you for doing it. I I love the answers every time. Well, it's complicated. It's
Well, that's what they say.
Well, it's pretty complicated.
Well, our algorithms are very, very complicated.
It's like, well,
we're giving them what they want. Yeah, I don't think so.
It doesn't seem so in this case, does it?
Sure doesn't.
Oh, man. Well, thank you for doing it. We'll stay on top of that and follow. Please let us know what you find out.
We'll do.
The second thing that you've been working on, we've talked a lot about, because in our view, the left doesn't just use the power of government to basically try to impact an agenda that is leftward leaning, most often environmental. They do it through the private system, right? They do it through corporate America too. And a big part of that is this environmental social governance standards, this ESG stuff. And we've talked a ton about that. But I know you have a particular interest in this as it affects farmers in South Dakota as well. So you've been on this?
Yeah, we have. And earlier this week, I filed a bill to get at this issue, because what we've seen, to your point, this ESG movement, which is environmental sustainability and governance, puts pressure on the private sector in this country, basically, to just lend money to or invest in the Democrats' favorite types of industries,
right?
And actually discourages, through regulation, through financial and securities regulators, and I would say more than discourage, pressures these companies not to invest in certain sectors of the economy, like oil and gas.
Yeah.
And that's the most obvious one. But what we've seen, if you can believe this, small ag lenders in South Dakota, even credit unions, have expressed concerns that they're starting to see this movement extend now to stepping on agricultural operations. So livestock operations, for example, they emit methane. Go figure, right?
This is the old AOC cow fart deal.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah, and so this, if left to its logical conclusion or extension, it gets crazy.
Yeah.
And I think, you're talking about core industries in this country that are critical to America's economy, and feeding America and fueling America, and you've got a government, a big government with a heavy hand of regulators leaning into, and in many cases pressuring companies. And that's why you see these gas prices. They've crushed oil and gas production in America to the point where we're now having to go other places to get it. And
which is wild, right?
It is wild. Yeah.
When you consider the fact that we're energy independent 2 years ago, and now we're in a situation where the President of the United States is down fist pumping in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long way, right?
It is, and whether it's Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or any of these other countries, some of which are run by thuggish dictators, the fact that an American president would have to go hat in hand and ask for energy that we have an abundance of right here in the United States, if he would only unleash it. So the key is to get these energy producers off the sidelines, back into the game, producing American energy, making America energy independent. And I don't think this administration gets it, because they're under so much pressure from their crazy left, and this climate agenda is just dominant in everything that they do.
Well, it's so funny, because you would think their arguments are just so bad, right? But the worst one is when the Ukraine issue happened, and all of a sudden they threw up their hands and they're like, well, there's nothing we can do about gas prices. It's Putin. Yeah. It's Putin's gas. And I was like, well, okay. If you have a domestic policy that makes you reliant on people like Vladimir Putin, isn't that just the biggest cell phone of all time, right?
Totally.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've put your livelihoods at the whims of a madman in Russia, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really stunning if you think about it. And honestly, he blames Putin, he blames Ukraine in the conflict there. These gas prices were out of sight well before that.
That's right.
And the reason they were out of sight is because he had shut down supply. Demand started coming back up, coming out of the pandemic, and we were in a situation where we had, the textbook definition is too many dollars chasing too few of goods, and we didn't have enough energy, and people wanted it, and gas prices went up. That's where it comes from, and that's how it gets solved, is by us producing American energy again.
No question about it. But this has now pressured your American consumer in the worst possible way, in that it intersects with inflation and what we've seen, which is 40-year highs in that regard. I know the Fed today announced a 0.75 basis point increase again. I mean, what's your take on where we're at and where we're going with this economy?
Well, and to your point, because the bill that we introduced on ESG basically said that these regulatory agencies have to consider the impact that their policies would have on inflation, as long as we're still experiencing inflation. And if it would increase the cost of goods in the economy, they wouldn't be able to move forward, be prevented from issuing these new regulations. But I think, on the broader issue of inflation and where this is headed, the Fed obviously is trying to step in. And I've seen this when I was a kid, or not a kid, when in high school, back in the late 70s and early 80s, we had this same situation where you had the Federal Reserve is ratcheting rates up to try and knock inflation down. And again, it's a function of policies. It's too much spending, too many dollars chasing too few goods, lack of a coherent energy policy, and the heavy hand of regulatory and taxing policy that this administration continues to pursue. And honestly, I think one of the best ways you want to get supply back up, you want to get investors investing in producing more goods in this economy to keep up with the demand that's out there. That starts bringing inflation down. So I think lighter regulatory touch, some relief in the tax world, coupled with reduced wasteful federal spending and a coherent energy policy, and you'll get back to equilibrium where we should be, where inflation's kind of at least in an acceptable range. And remember, 1.4%. When Biden took office, 1.4%, 9.1% year over year last month,
Jeez.
Represents for an American family, according to the Joint Economic Committee analysis, an additional $9,000 a year.
I mean, it's the biggest tax
for
increase
basic
in history.
necessities. It's on everybody.
Yeah,
it's on everybody. It hits low-income Americans the hardest.
Well, unfortunately, all the solutions that you identified are entirely reliant on the Republican Party coming into power, because these guys, as best I can tell, their strategy is redefining what a recession is, right? I mean, we've sort of worked with the common definition of 2 quarters that are negative GDP constitutes a recession. Now you've seen over the last week, they're trying to reevaluate that definition.
Yeah, and they're already hinting at, tomorrow the numbers come out, and some of the suggestions have been we could be a point down negative GDP, which would represent 2 quarters of negative economic growth, which technically, under the old definition, was a recession. But now the administration, no, it's not. It's much broader. It's much broader. Well, that's not what the American people are feeling. I mean, and I think that they don't have the capacity or the will at this point to make the changes that are necessary to get us back on a better footing when it comes to our economy, which is why, to your point, we've got to flip the majorities in the Congress.
Well, that's just the only answer, in my view. So where does that stand? We've got, obviously, look, the environment is what it is. It's as a result of everything that this administration has done that's just turned to garbage over the last year and a half. All of the environmental signs look like Republicans are going to have a big day. Obviously, there's a lot of work that has to go into that between now and November. Where do you think that is in the Senate?
I think it feels pretty good. I think the environment is good as gas prices stay high, Biden's poll numbers stay low, and usually midterm elections kind of track with that. We have to execute. Our candidates have to execute, and they can't underperform, even though it's a good environment.
And we've seen that, right?
We've seen that.
When I was working in the Senate, we had 2 consecutive cycles in 10 and 12 where we managed to shoot ourselves in the foot almost every way possible.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of reprising of that talk about whether or not our candidates have it. What's your sense? Do you think that we can get on track here?
I do, and I think there's plenty. I mean, there's time left, clearly, but all the things you have to do, what I call the blocking and tackling of campaigns. You got to raise money. You got to have a message. You got to have at least some sort of an organization out there to turn people out on election day. So it's really executing on those essentials, doing the blocking and tackling. And some of our candidates have been a little slow on the uptake. But I think, there's time. And in the end, this is going to come down to when you look at 2 candidates, who among them is going to be a vote for the Biden agenda,
right,
who's going to be a vote against it. And it's going to be inflation, energy, the border, and a lot of things that I think really are favorable for us. So, but we, that being said, it's no excuse for our candidates not getting the job done, and we've underperformed when it comes to fundraising and other areas. We just got to step up the game and finish strong, and I think we can have a really good outcome.
Yeah, well, if anybody knows how to do that, it's you. I mean, you started your Senate career, as you said, in a tough 02 race that was ridiculously difficult, but then you turn around in 04 and beat the sitting majority leader of the United States Senate. You know how to win a tough race.
Well, I either sometimes to be better to be lucky than good, maybe, but
I'm pretty sure that was not luck.
Well, we worked hard and had a good organization, and but to take advantage of a good environment like we have this year, you just can't assume that that's going to carry you. You can't say, we're going to have a tailwind or we're going to have a wave election. You have to be able. You've still got to do the things that are necessary to bring it across the finish line. And I'm hoping that in the next few months, as our candidates rise to that challenge, that we're going to have a really good year. Yeah,
well, I hope so too. So your job, in addition to representing South Dakota, you've got to keep all these people in line as the Republican whip in the United States Senate. The Democrats are trying to do all kinds of terrible stuff here at the end, and we've seen this before, right? Political fortunes go south. It seems to me like Democrats have a reaction to that is like, if 2010 was a good guide, try to do every terrible thing you can possibly do. It's almost like a political suicide mission in trying to do exactly what the the American people are saying, please do not do.
Right.
They're trying to reprise that again, it seems to me. And you guys are having to fight those battles every day up there.
We are, and even though, I mean, you'd think your lesson, if you're in a hole, quit digging, right? So they want to spend more, tax more, regulate more, in an economy that's got 9.1%, 40-year high inflation. An economy is very wobbly. When you talk about 2 consecutive quarters, potentially when the numbers come out tomorrow, of negative economic growth, we're in a really uncertain time, and you would think that the very things that put us in this hole in the first place, you would probably say, let's not do more of that. But that's what they're trying to do more of. And then they're also trying to change the subject. They don't want to talk about these things because they know their policy decisions have led to a lot of these bad outcomes. So they're trying to shift to all these other types of issues, create culture wars, when in fact the American people are focused very much on their pocketbooks and on kitchen table issues.
No question. So how often are you sending flowers and a box of chocolates to Joe Manchin's office on a day-to-day basis?
Well, and I tell people one of the reasons we want to get the majority in November is so I can quit mowing his lawn. Because I do, in a 50-50 Senate, we spend a lot. And thank God for him. I mean, he and Sinema have stepped up and prevented some really bad things from happening to the country. And preserving and protecting the institution of the Senate is job number one, and they came through in a big way for that. But it's a lot of pressure on them, obviously. And so we do what we can to work with them constructively, hopefully, in a way that advances what we think are the right policies in the right direction for the country, as opposed to the far left, which is what their leadership in the Congress and in the administration has right now. Which is what they've all become, right? I mean, which is so amazing. 10 years ago, there actually used to be some discrepancy in the Democratic Party about what it is that you're trying to get done, right? Now it's like AOC and Joe Manchin. Yeah, it is. It's become a party of extremes, and unfortunately, to the degree that there are any moderates, you can really count them on 2 fingers. Right. In really the House or the Senate for that. There's a few in the House. But if you think about them having unified control of the government, the House, the Senate, and the White House, they run all of government, which is pushed because the progressive wing is where the energy, the activism, the money in their politics is today. It's pushed Biden way left. It's pushed their leadership. And now they're, the AOC wing, the Bernie Sanders wing in the Senate runs the Democrat Party. And that's scary and dangerous for the country. It really is their agenda, which if they ever needed any sort of justification for that point of view, I mean, you consider the fact that Joe Biden spent 40 years hanging around the United States Senate, and then all of a sudden he becomes president, and whatever it is that he worked on up to that point is irrelevant. He's now literally indistinguishable from Bernie Sanders' agenda. Yeah, totally. And that's, I think, it's been hard for some of us who would have watched him in the Senate, and he did try to run as a moderate. Now, most of us who knew him in the Senate knew he was a liberal, but and was never right on anything. It was
amazing that he had that path to begin with.
Yeah,
right?
it's amazing that lane was open to him of all people.
Right.
But there was an expectation, I think, among the American people that he might be a moderate, and they found out otherwise. And so I think getting the House and the Senate back perhaps forces him to become the moderate that he promised the American people he would be in the first place.
Yeah, well, let's hope. Before I get to our 3 questions, I got to ask, do you have any more workout buddies? When I was in the Senate, every time I'd walk to work, I'd see this gazelle running around the Capitol at like setting land speed records. I imagine you keep that up. You look like you're still dealing with that.
Well, I don't run as far as fast or as often. Let's put it that way. There's something about every decade threshold you cross, things start breaking down.
Tell that to Grassley. Though,
everything hurts,
right?
and what doesn't hurt doesn't work. Yeah, Chuck's kind of a freak of nature, really.
He really
is.
The
fact that he can get up and still roll in the morning early like that. But you try and stay motivated just to keep some level of fitness and I don't know. I find myself, I think more clearly if I can get something done in the morning. I'm kind of getting the blood flowing and
just knock off 10-15 miles before breakfast and see how that goes.
Yeah, maybe not quite. You'd be calling. They'd be sending. They'd be calling 911 to come and get me if they had to do
get
that.
The battles
so
out.
To take me to the emergency ward. Yeah.
That's great. Well, listen, we have 3 very big questions that we ask every guest, and these are important things.
Yes.
Particularly for a guy from South Dakota, because I imagine you have well-defined answers, at least on this first one, which is if you could plan your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
This is, and for those of you who aren't from the Midwest, this may not mean a lot to you, but a 6-pack and a pound is something you buy at Taco John's, and it's not a 6-pack of what you might think. It's a 6-pack of soft shell tacos and a pound of potato olays. And then I would cap that off probably with a Blizzard from DQ, maybe chocolate chip cookie dough or something like that.
There you go.
If you're going out, why not go out in style, right?
Yeah, it's
a lot of grease, a lot of sugar,
but yet a wholesome Midwestern dining experience.
Yeah,
I love it. All right, so I'm interested in this one because I've never asked you anywhere near a question like this. But if you never got into public service at all, right? If your entire career was blank and you had a blue sky choice of something to do with your life, and it can be literally anything to fill that time with, what do you think you'd do?
Good question. When I was in middle school, I had an aspiration to play in the NBA.
Yeah, you were a pretty good ball player from what I understand.
Yeah, but not that good.
Certainly better than Ted Cruz, who said he was going to be an NBA player.
Yeah, right. No, I'll take that game. But I think I love the game and I stay involved with it. I'm a fan. I'd love to be a commentator.
Yeah.
Now, the downside is, as you maybe recall, in the Seinfeld episode where George doesn't have a job and he's thinking about what to do, and he says, maybe I could be a sports commentator. And Jerry says, well, normally they hire people for those jobs who actually played sports. And he says, yeah, but I make good observations. And so I say, I make good observations. Just ask my wife. I predict things that are going to happen. I think I could do this and do it well. And I think it'd be fun doing it.
And she'd love to find another profession where you could talk more than you as a senator, right?
Yeah, right.
That's real popular on the home front.
I could filibuster. Yeah,
I love it. No, that's a good answer. It's similar to mine, actually. Yeah. I think it'd be great, doing a baseball season where you just go through, travel towns, and it just sounds fun.
That sounds fun, or even these guys that do like the NFL football show on Sunday. Yeah. And just get a chance to talk about, and then they're going to visit the teams and going. I could go to Lambeau and
totally
talk with. Aaron Rodgers and see if he really designed his rollout this year to look like Nick Cage.
I was going to say, did you see his hair? I can't believe you're proud of that.
Well, there's a lot of off-field drama there, I will say, and that's I'm not.
You're not in whole hog on that deal.
No, I like him on the field, but
we'll keep his locks under the helmet as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. So the third question is where we get a little esoteric. Mm-hmm. This is examining the mind of John Thune. right?
Deep thoughts.
So as we see it, successful people are generally motivated by one of two things, and we shorthand it as saying the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that doesn't mean anybody doesn't like to win or likes to lose. What it means is the thrill of victory people are sort of the sunny optimists, are always charging up the hill for the next endeavor. The agony of defeat crowd is every accomplishment they've ever had in life, it lasts like 2 seconds, right? But any setback they've ever had is what motivates them and they think about constantly, right? So their greatest success basically pales in comparison to what they think is their most humiliating defeat in terms of what motivates them on a day-to-day basis. Where do you find yourself?
Well, I'm a hopeful optimist, and that's kind of my political philosophy. I think, the two great motivators in politics are hope and fear. And I think we ought to be about appealing to people's hopes, not preying on their fears. But, being Scandinavian, my grandfather came here from Norway back in 1906, and my dad, and so being Scandinavian, you kind of believe life is supposed to be hard, right?
You're singing my hymnal.
That's very fatalistic and all that. But my dad would say, everybody'd say he's a pessimist. He'd say, no, I'm a realist. My mom, on the other hand, was kind of this optimist, and I tend to have more of her qualities. But I think as you think about the things in life and you do, and some of the wins and the losses, victories and defeats, you learn a lot from the defeats, but it's a lot more fun to win. And that, to me, you're always motivated, at least I hope, to do things that are purpose-driven and that make a difference, and that make you better, that you get better at. And sometimes, coming from drawing from a competitive sports background, you learn from your losses, and hopefully it makes you a better player for the next game. But believe me, I'd much rather win.
Yeah, a serious thrill of victory guy. Is what I'm taking out of that.
Yeah. And when you get the thrill of victory, you're right. It doesn't last long because you're always thinking about. But somebody reminded me the other day that in all your endeavors and everything like that you tend to focus on and remember more clearly the losses than you do the victories. And so
it does for Scandinavians from the Midwest.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Not for everybody.
Yeah,
Not for everybody.
No. It's something that's our clan's very proud of. So.
I love it. All right. So in addition to all of this, I'd be remiss if I didn't note that you yourself are up for re-election this fall.
Right.
Where can listeners go and see what you're up to and help you out?
Well, we're obviously website, just www, whatever it is, johnthune.com. If people are interested in the campaign, we can get a lot of information out there. We've got I had a primary earlier. Now I have a general election.
Yeah, I think you posted a mere 80% of the vote.
Yeah,
it
wasn't quite that good, but as being Scandinavian, I focused on the 30% that didn't vote for me. So it's back to your earlier question.
Yeah.
But and in general, everybody says, well, it's an easy race. But I remind people that up until when in the 2004 race against Tom Daschle, we were 0-6 in the Dakotas.
Yeah.
We didn't have a single Republican from either North or South Dakota in Congress.
That was incredible to even imagine it was that close, right?
Yeah.
Just in the spectrum of your career.
Yeah.
You went from Conrad and Dorgan and Tim Johnson and Daschle to now
Pomeroy. Now we're 6-0.
Yeah.
But you can't take that for granted. And so even though we're, like I said, we're doing all the things you need to do, and you've got to raise money and be prepared.
Yeah, well, it takes some leadership to get that done. Those things don't happen organically. You've got to actually make them happen, which you've done for yourself and for your colleagues. You also do an awful lot to try to help Senate Republicans get elected across this country, which we thank you for immensely.
It's a team sport.
It is. Yeah. It is. And the more people that recognize that, the better. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for coming in here today, and let us know how these pieces of legislation and everything is progressing.
Will do. Thanks, Josh, and thanks for having me on the program.
Perfect. Take care.
All right. See ya.